Today is going to be a horror video. Today, we're going to watch some creepypastas on YouTube. There you go. Our first creepypasta, well, creepypasta is mostly a creepypasta is mostly a scary website where creepypasta is sort of a scary thing, you know. Creepypasta is super freaking scary. So if you do not like scary, you can just skip the video. Anything. We are gonna watch some creepypastas. Here we are going to watch some creepypastas like we always do.
Hello guys and gals, welcome back to another episode of Creepypasta. This time we do a much requested non-gaming creepypasta called Dead Bart. This creepypasta begins by telling us about how Fox counts its Simpsons episodes, how they refuse to count a couple of episodes, officially leading the number of total episodes to be inconsistent. The reason for this, as the author tells us, is that it's because of a lost episode from the first season. Finding any details about this is difficult at best, and no one who was working on the show at the time likes to discuss the subject. But from what little information that was gathered, it appeared that Matt Groening had written this lost episode entirely. But during production of the first season, Matt began to act quite strangely. He was very quiet, nervous, and morbid. You couldn't mention this info to anyone or else they can get very angry, and this was specially forbidden to be spoken about near Matt himself. The author claimed to have first heard it in an event where David Silverman was speaking at. Someone in the crowd had asked about the episode, The Lost One, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation early. The production number of the episode was 7G06. It was titled Dead Bart, but the production number was switched to the episode Moaning Lisa to get rid of any evidence and assumptions. Even asking anyone who worked on this episode would cause them to do anything in their power to stop you from meeting Matt Groening himself. At a fan event, supposedly, the author followed him after he spoke to fans, and as he was leaving the building, the author finally had a chance to speak to the man himself. Matt wasn't disturbed about the stalking whatsoever and decided to speak with the author. When the author mentioned this lost episode, Matt started to tremble and appeared to be on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and gave it to the author, begging never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a web address, and the author would rather not release his address for obvious reasons. The site was completely black, except for a line of yellow text, a download link, rather. The author clicked on this link, and a file began to download, and once this file was downloaded onto the computer, it started to go crazy. The author claimed it appeared to be a very nasty virus. System restore wouldn't work, and the player backed up the file to a CD and restarted the computer and supposedly cleared it all up, all the data. author then tried to open this file again in an empty computer, and as he or she suspected, it was an episode of The Simpsons. The episode began like any other episode, but had poor quality animation. The first act was normal, but the acting of the characters was off. Homer appeared to be more angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa was anxious, and Bart seemed to genuinely hate and scorn his parents. The episode centered around the Simpsons family taking a plane trip, and at around the end of the first act, the plane took off. Bart was fooling around, and at around 50 feet off the ground, Bart had broke a window on the plane and was sucked out. The author tells us that in the beginning of the Simpsons series, Matt had this idea, and that the animated style of the show would represent life, and that death turned things more realistic. This technique was used in this episode. Bart's corpse was barely noticeable. The animators took great advantage in the non-moving figure and made it look nearly photorealistic. Act 1 was over with a shot of Bart's corpse, and when Act 2 began, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting around the table crying. This crying went on and on and on. It got more painful and more realistic, better acting than you would normally see. The animation began to decay as the crying went on, and if you listened closely, murmuring was heard in the background. It reached a point where the characters could barely be pointed out. There was stretching and blurring, and it began to look like deformed shadows with bright colors thrown onto them. There were faces looking through the windows constantly flashing, so you could never really make out what they were. The crying went on for almost all of Act 2. Act 3 began with a title card stating 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were very thin, sitting at their table with no sign of Maggie or any pets. The family went to Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted. As the family traveled to the cemetery, the homes became more and more decrepit, eventually looking all abandoned. As they reached Bart's tombstone, Bart was just laying there, just like at the end of Act 1. The family began to cry again, and then eventually stopped and just started to stare at Bart's body. The camera zoomed into Homer's face, and according to the summaries, this is where Homer tells a joke, but it was inaudible in the version the author was watching. The view began zooming out, and the episode closed. The tombstones in the background had the names of all the guest stars in the show. Some of them hadn't even been on the show at the time. Each of these tombstones had death dates on them. For some of the stars like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the actual date of death was written on the tombstone itself. The credits were silent and appeared to be handwritten. The final scene was the family sitting on their couch, just like the intro, except it was drawn hyper-realistically, just like Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to the author. You could use every tombstone to predict the deaths of the guest stars. But there was something odd about the stars who hadn't died. All their date of deaths were on the same date. Alright, well, this was a pretty popular non-gaming creepypasta. It was very much requested, and honestly, I really don't know why. First, we'll start off. It obviously reminded me of Squidward's suicide, in that this is a lost episode with its morbid taste and all that. Now, I really don't watch The Simpsons, so I'm not really keen on the history of the show, or really the mythos. And I know little of Matt himself. According to the creepypasta, some animators left a conference because of the mentioning of this episode, and Matt himself having emotional issues on the mentioning of this episode as well. Now, I've never really been able to find any actual events such as this, so that sort of kills the creepypasta for me. I mean, one of my big complaints about this is that unlike Squidward's suicide, which never really referenced many events, and told the tale of an employee involved in the project in a realistic fashion, that made sense, and it made people question whether this actually happened. But here, such events made people question the authenticity, and for me, it really killed any authenticity. And yes, creepypastas aren't supposed to be real. Let's be real here. But it's nice to have that illusion, as it really adds to the experience. Taking it away gives the tale almost no meaning to an extent. Another thing is that, unlike Squidward's suicide, that tale makes sense. With Squidward's character, depressed and nothing to show for, the character commits suicide. Maybe it's because I don't really watch The Simpsons and I don't understand everything about the characters, but the events in this lost episode didn't really make much sense. It felt unorganized. It was really just Bart dying, tons of crying with static and distortion and walking through an empty town, and finally Homer telling a joke, which we can't even hear. Oh wait, no, sorry, we missed the final hyper-realistic scene, which by the way is a pretty recurring definition of cliche. And you know what, I'll just throw up the actual definition right now. It's essentially an art style resembling high-resolution photography. So basically a very realistic portrayal of the Simpsons family and the Tombstones. It sort of did remind me of the Fallout 3 number station to an extent because of these tombstones, which, it doesn't really add any fear, it's just confusion to me. It kind of feels like the last dates in the number station. I know I'm referencing that a lot. And that maybe there could have been an apocalypse. It could have explained a deserted town. Now, it's not a bad creepypasta, much like Sonic.exe, and even Jeff the Killer to an extent. It's somewhat overly hyped. It's not bad or awful by any means. There's even a video that exists, which I'll link below for your enjoyment. It really doesn't have many cliches, and even the ones that exist, again, like the hyper-realism, it really doesn't destroy the experience. Some of the events felt way too over-exaggerated and unrealistic. It's an alright creepypasta, but it seems a little hyped to me. Again, that's just an opinion. And that's really all I have to say. What would you add or change in this creepypasta to make it better? And what would you rate this creepypasta, and why? This has been another episode of Creepypastas, and if you like what you saw, then like, comment, and subscribe. This is me, Mudahar, and I'm out.
Well, guys, that was a creepypasta. I remember. I don't really want to actually read them. They're like not my kind of type. But I'm not trying to copyright this guy. Really, I'm not trying to really do that. I'm not the kind of person who copyright. I just want to do a horror thing cause I don't really know how to do that. So if you guys can help me out, do that stuff, make some stories or tell me stories, I will try to upload it on YouTube. Remember, guys, this was not copyright. This was only because I only did this only once because I didn't want to read no creepypastas. Cause really, they scare the shit out of me. So I guess I'll see you later. Remember, this was not copyright. I don't own the video. This is just a video of me watching creepypasta. So I guess I'll see you guys later.